All right, let's get into this. What is this show about? The show is basically about food stamps, specifically what's going to be happening with Trump and the USDA and all the blue states. I don't just mean like a couple of blue states. I mean most, if not all, and some of them may break lines with the Democrats and actually hand over who their membership list is for food stamps. But to be very clear, with this whole Somali multi-million, potentially billion plus fraud, I mean, they're talking billions at this point. What I'm thinking is this: some states are very likely to go ahead and come forward and send the list of members to Trump. But as it stands, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the federal government could be completely cutting off paying their version of the administrative costs to disperse, send out, pay for these food stamps, which is like a holy crap experience. Here's why. When there's food stamps, there's two main financial costs you have to keep in mind. One, the easy one, it's the money that actually goes to the people. Easy peasy. The next one, I got to make this a little bit lower real quick. Hold on, let me just, ooh, that is tight. That is real tight. Oh my, there we go. All right, here we, hold on. There, whoa. That's a little better? I'm still too high. I'm still too high here. Let me get this a little lower. Hold on. Boom. Let me squeeze that in there. It's okay. I'm pretty all right. Okay, here we go. So there's two main payments that you have to know about. Payment number one is where basically the money goes out to the people. Payment number two is the administration costs. So there's human beings clicking on a computer going, do I want to send food stamps to Beverly? Well, Karen told me Beverly is not a good person. That's basically the administrative costs. Now, the federal government pays 50% of those. The state government pays 50% of those. Now, if you remove 50% of the administrative costs, these states, just to be very fair, cannot cover the massive amount of money needed for very long. Now, I don't tell you this to freak you out. I just tell you so that you're educated on the subject, because at the end of the day, if you don't know, then when it finally hits the legacy news, channels, when you're like, I haven't heard anything about this online, then you'll be like, yeah, I already knew, I'm aware, I prepared, yada, yada, yada. Here are the specific states that are going to be taking place with this entire thing. Real quick, please give a big thank you to DMF-E1K. She's been a member with us, I think the second longest. She is royalty with this particular channel. She is Diana. Please give her a big round of applause for the $2 donation. Also, if you have Medicare questions, as you know, it shuts down today. Today's the last day that you can call and basically get details going about getting set up for Medicare, and getting a better plan, getting a tune-up on your Medicare. Also, ask these guys specifically about the fraud that's going on. They keep coming out with new charges, new things against doctors, nurses, back office personnel, overcharging personnel. Give them a call to make sure your Medicare is safe, okay? All right, with that said, very important. What you need to know, these are the states and how many people are likely going to be affected. Now remember, these states could probably, pay 100% of the administration cost, but it's going to run down their reserves to be able to do it. If and when they do it, it's going to cause some problems, because as we get farther down the line of the month of January, or even just through the rest of the month of December. All right, here's what I think is going to happen. Okay, here's what I think is going to happen. Hold on, let me get this. It's still a little bit too high. I don't know why this thing is so high. Hold on. There we go. Let's do, it's so much better. There we go. Okay. All right, now it's fine. So here's the deal. Here's what you need to know. I believe that Trump has already measured out, based off of the state budgets, what they can and cannot afford. That's why he's doing this. That's why he's playing this game. That's why he's essentially removing this money from the pool that they can use. So here's the idea. Here's the simple idea. I think what's going to happen is this. Trump knows that the states, the blue states, the Democrat states, can afford to keep paying food stamps through the administration costs through the rest of December. Holidays will be covered. But January, those states probably will have a more difficult time with how much budget money they have to go ahead and put forward. Now, you might be saying, well, they get a new budget in January. Well, that is true to some degree, but the money has to come from somewhere. And the expectation that all the taxes for these states are going to be paid in January ain't realistic. Most people pay their taxes to states at different times, but obviously a lot of those taxes go out throughout the year. There's a big clump during one of the months, not January. So you guessed it, Trump has figured out mathematically that the states, specifically the Democrat states, are not going to be able to go ahead and continuously, repetitively pay out food stamps because they're not going to be able to afford the administrative costs. Now, this is a very sneaky tactic on behalf of Trump. It's brilliant in a nefarious way. It's brilliant in a evil genius kind of way. Let me explain why. All right, so you know how at the end of the day, Trump believes that food stampers, poor people, homeless people, chronically homeless, etc., will rally and get the Democrats to, basically bend a knee to what Trump wants so that food stamps will be turned back on. I don't agree with that because I work with the homeless every single day, and that's not how the homeless work. The homeless and the super low income, they don't call their senators. They don't call their House reps usually. I mean, they should. It'd be great if they would, but they don't. So this whole all of the homeless people are going to magically get an unlimited minute phone to sit on the phone and wait to bitch out their senator is unrealistic. But Trump believes that. He believes that will happen. All right, let's go through the states and how many people in each state are going to be affected by this situation. Here we go. There's Arizona, about 1.1 million SNAP recipients. What do we got over here? We got California, 5.5 million. California's a biggie. Colorado, 600,000. Connecticut, 400,000. Delaware, 150,000. District of Columbia, 150,000. Hawaii, 200,000. Illinois, 2.3 million. That's a lot. Maine, 250,000. Maryland, 800,000. Massachusetts, 1 million. Michigan, 1.6 million. Minnesota, 500,000. Nevada, 500,000. New Jersey, 900,000. I'm actually in New Jersey right now. New Mexico, 450,000. New York, 3 million. Let's see what else we got. 700,000 for Oregon. Pennsylvania, 1.8 million. Rhode Island, 150,000. Vermont, 100,000, which kind of surprises me because that's the Bernie state. Virginia, 800,000. Washington, 1 million. Kansas, 300,000. Those are all the states that are going to be targeted as a result of this situation where you may get your food stamps late. You might not get them at all. And that's because the federal government is very likely this week. And you're going to see it splashing the news literally Monday. Monday morning, this is going to be all over CNN, MSNBC, Fox News about this situation. Now, I'm going to do one better than the legacy news channels, and I'm going to tell you what the options of those states are to try and interact with basically Trump and Rollins at the USDA. Because remember, the USDA is the one who handles the money being sent out for the food stamps. What can these states do to try and make sure that you continuously get to receive your food stamps going forward, right? That's the main question everybody has. What are the states going to do? How likely are they going to be successful at forcing Trump to pay out these administrative fees? Yada, yada, yada. Now, we've already covered in the prior video, what are the legal cases? What are the federal rules, state rules that will be applicable? We even did private group rules and stuff like that. In this, we're going to talk about what the states are almost absolutely likely going to do next week. And so this will tell you how interested your state is in trying to fight to feed you, the person on food stamps. Let's go through it. Number one, the states, and some of them have already done this, may file for a new emergency injunction or a TRO. If you don't know what a TRO is, it's a temporary restraining order. And that's basically where they ask the federal judge to stop the USDA, to block the USDA from withholding the funds needed to go ahead and pay for the administration, the personnel to pay out the food stamps. And this is basically like a stay that while the litigation is occurring, the USDA would have to pay it out. Another thing the states can do is they can expand the existing October 2025 lawsuit and add the withholding of these administrative funds to basically the Administrative Procedural Act lawsuit that they had, which is now sitting at the Supreme Court. Now, as you know, this went to one of the justices on the Supreme Court, but it all kind of became moot because, to be fair, this whole thing, it basically, when the government turned back on and Trump signed, I remember I did a video on it. He was literally signing the documents to turn the government back on as I was making the video about it. So it kind of made that case moot to some degree. In my opinion, realistically, with this whole situation, you could try to do that. You could try to attach it to that and grow it, but I don't know. That claim is probably stuck on its own. It's its own island. You could shift costs temporarily inside the states from general funds to pay for the administration costs to basically administer the fees for food stamps. To be fair, though, that's a lot of money. Even California, even New York do not have the massive amount of money just always on tap to handle 50% of the administration of the food stamps. And while, yes, it is highly automated, no, it is not a perfect system. It requires quite a few people, and it is a massive, it's millions and millions of people on the list, okay? Now, the other thing is they could go ahead and tap the temporary assistance for needy families contingency funds, or tap contingency funds. Well, they would have to wait until 2026 because they already used up the 2025 ones when the government was shut down. But they could tap contingency funds that are available and say, okay, this is an emergency situation. We need money to actually process the payments to pay people. They could go ahead and do that function to process payments. Now, another thing, too, is that basically they could go ahead and slow down the process of essentially, paying out benefits. So instead of you getting paid on the 1st or the 5th, you might get paid, food stamps on the 10th, the 15th, the 20th, the 25th. Would this suck? Yes. Would it be the end of the world? No. But it's politics again. It's the blue states saying, I ain't going to do it. And remember, the whole reason this thing exists, just to be clear, is that at the end of the day, this whole process exists because Trump in February through the USDA requested the members list for all of the food stamp recipients in all the states. All the red states handed it over. All the blue states, however, did not. And now it's like December. You know what I mean? Real quick, our oldest and most cherished and most beloved, although Diana's a tight second, Moon Lover, 1917, did an amazing, massive $20 donation. You got to catch up with me, by the way. You got to reach out to me because I have some cute dog photos I need to send you. I have to send them to you because they're very adorable. And I think realistically, Sweetie is going to get her own channel where she's going to wear a wig. She is the chubby, flubby, bully, piggy puff dog of mine. She is so adorable. And when I say adorable, every trait of her, of like a negative girlfriend that has red flags everywhere, that's Sweetie. I'm telling you, if she is bitching you out in the middle of the night and barking at you for 30 minutes straight because the pillow wasn't ruffled right and you got to pull it out, get it right, slip it back under her, that's Sweetie. She is a 90-pound pickle puff and I love her. She's my big, chubby, fluffy girl. Anyways, point is, Moon Lover, you got to catch up with me. I have to send you. I'm putting a big heart on that. Thank you for the mega $20 donation. That's absolutely amazing. And there's two main people who have been with this channel forever. And it's Moon Lover. Can I say your name? I don't know if I can say your name because your name used to be on the thing. But anyway, let me know if I could, whatever. But bottom line is, she has been with this channel since I was making videos in a cave and then in a Prius. And I still have that Prius. It looks so bad. When I drive my Prius up to Walmart, the moms take their kids and try to hide their eyes from how just destroyed, and the paint is, the clear coat's gone. It's been gone for a while. Now we're on the paint. All right. Now we're past the paint in some areas. We're down to bare plastic is what I'm saying. Point is, it's just that I guess buy Toyota. You can abuse the Toyota. just keep driving it. As long as you fill it with oil and give it a little kiss at the end of the night, she will drive you all the way down that county line. I'm telling you, a little bit of country music in the background, be all right. All right, here's the deal. Super thank you to Moon Lover. All right, with that said, very, very, very important. Let's keep rocking and rolling through this. So, in other words, if the states went ahead and tapped contingency funds, they could do that. They do have some of them have some left over for 2025. And then those pots will be refilled in essentially 2026. So, that's the next thing that's going on. Now, another thing you need to keep in mind is that they could go ahead and not approve any new SNAP recipients. Because think about it, if they didn't have to work on the administrative costs of the whole thing and they weren't approving any more SNAP recipients, or they were slow rolling them, that would greatly reduce the amount of administrative costs that they'd have, because they wouldn't have to have all those personnel figuring out who, what, when, and where. And you could shift them over to those who should pay the benefits on those benefits that need to be paid. Not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. Now, next thing you got to keep in mind, again, this is important. When it comes to essentially, caseloads, when it comes to objections, appeals, when it comes to some sort of issue with that, they could slow roll those as well. Because think about it, if they go ahead and have too many cases for 50% of the staff, if they have too many new applicants for 50% of the staff, if they have too many benefits to pay out too quickly for 50% of the staff, they could just slow roll it in each state. California has so many recipients, so does New York. Expect those states to likely have to do those things as well. Now, here's the kicker. If they have to slow roll things, the expectation goes on the states that they're also specifically going to fund additional places where you can buy food. But if they got to pay for the food, they might as well just pay for the food stamps. You know what I mean? They might as well just do that. All right, next thing. You ever think about that? Wasn't it weird how during the government shutdown, they were ready and willing to get the army and set up all these mobile food pantries and pay for all this food, but they weren't willing to just find the money for the food stamps? Like, isn't that just weird? They just assume that some people would magically make it to the pantries and the rest would just be, figure that shit out on your own. They just assume that. To me, I would have been like, yeah, we just have to find the amount we need to pay food stamps. But, for each week as it comes. But instead, they're like, no, we're gonna fund pantries, and the pantries are gonna go ahead and provide the food. Well, how the hell are some of these homeless people gonna go to the pantries? A lot of them don't have bus cards, bus tickets, bus fare in general. I like to complain about the level of stupidity I see. And I see a lot of stupidity. And to be fair, if I'm really honest with you guys, when I watch the senators, that is a bit of a class act. When I watch the House reps, some of the people y'all vote in for House positions, I mean, aside from the ones that have just been busted for multi-million-dollar fraud, aside from them, but some of the people you guys vote in, and I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying you, the royal you, the group of you, how you vote in some of these individuals, you guys tend to sometimes maybe just saying vote in some of the dumbest bleepers I've ever seen. I am impressed by the level of stupidity that some of these individuals that you voted actually have. And for me, I like watching reality TV, and y'all keep giving me great channel content. I got to tell you, I watch them. I watch these House of Representatives walk in there, do their spiel. They're so well dressed, but their brain is not functioning at a level that actually gets the job done. Unless, of course, they're stealing money. Then it does. I have noticed that. I have noticed that quite well. All right, with that said, and that's Democrats and Republicans. Holy cannoli, let me tell you. All right, so let's get to the next thing real quick. Okay, so another thing, too, is that they may go ahead and pick which counties, which cities are going to get food stamps and which ones are not. That's a great way to reduce or schedule out, this city on this date, this county on this state, this town on this date. That's a great way to schedule out and apportion workloads when you can't afford to pay all the personnel that you need to actually process food stamps. Now, another thing, too, just to be clear, is that, when it comes to the actual payment of these funds, getting access to these funds, they could use AI or be working on AI or have already a system of AI in place to try and automate more of these functions. I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm not saying your entire food stamp situation is based on AI. You shouldn't be worried about that. But I'm sure that there are processes that are automated by AI inside the government related to food stamps. All right. Now, another thing that I think is going to be important, okay? They are very likely to, these states, the blue states, to sue the USDA Monday. Because the moment that they have an actual injury occur, because remember, you need to have an actual injury occur. The moment they don't receive any funds, the moment the USDA, could be Monday, could be Tuesday, could be Wednesday. It's going to probably be one of those 3 days when this thing falls apart. The moment that happens, a party then at that point has what's called an injury. And the injured party then has the right to sue. A lot of people think you can just sue for whatever you want. No, you actually legally have to have what's called an injury. And if an injury occurs, then you can go ahead and pop forward and begin the lawsuit process. You can also try and join that situation to other types of lawsuits. In very limited situations, you don't technically have to have an injury. There are other ways to do it. But for the most part, with all this stuff, you're supposed to have an injured party. Okay. Now, with that said, I think Trump is going to expect the states to lobby Congress. They're going to say, wah, 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 USDA, you suck. Senators and House reps, bail us out. Now, here's my thing. There are way more red states than there are blue states. Additionally, there are the House and the Senate, as you know, has a lot of Republicans in it right now. They're going to side with Trump. Okay. Now, this is not cutting directly food stamps for the food stamp recipient. It's cutting 50% of the funding to the people who have to administer the food stamps to those people. So Trump has found a way through USDA, through Rollins, to essentially give the middle finger to the states without saying he's cutting off food stamps for the people, because food stamps could still be paid. It's just up to the states to hand over their recipient list. Why is this important? Well, because as we're seeing with the Somalian group up north, it's the amount of fraud is they were actually, and I mean, I couldn't believe this. They were actually funding with literal funds meant for autistic children, terrorists. They were funding terrorists with funds meant to feed autistic children. Like, who is this Democratic Party anymore? Like, and that's the thing. Like, when I look at this, like the Democratic Party, like I think of like the Clinton Democratic Party. Sure, there was the whole Lewinsky, I got it. But like, who is this new Democratic Party? Like, they are just out of control and apparently okay. I mean, did you see what the politicians? I wasn't going to single one out there. I wanted to, but did you see how one of the politicians responded? He was just like, whatever, I'm mad at what Trump's. It just blew the pancake off of my mind. I couldn't believe it. These were funds meant specifically for autistic, disabled children that were then diverted just mind-blowingly to the people that literally do horrific things to human beings across the globe. I just like, who are these Democrats now? Like, I don't know what home they live in, because it's not okay. It's just not good. All right. So with that said, there's a few other things that you need to know. Okay. The Democrats are going to bring up a legal fight that basically Trump is singling them out. And they're going to be able to bring this up because it's all blue states that are being screwed by the pooch when it comes to receiving their administration costs to pay out food stamps. But at the same time, Trump gets to argue, hey, y'all did this to yourselves. You grouped together and then refused to send out that list. And you and I both know there is a treasure trove of fraud, a treasure trove of problems in New York, California. Y'all know that. Y'all know that there is a massive level of fraud going on in those places because, every week I do a new OIG, discovery video where they arrested somebody, they charged somebody, etc. And that was the real eye-opener for me. A lot of people didn't realize how many, social security numbers were being stolen. They didn't realize that actual SSA personnel, some of which have been arrested, some, they're still being found out, but they didn't realize that there are literally real social security representatives who sold social security numbers. And that's, to me, one of the problems is that how do you get the American people to realize that the government is very good at a couple of things? It's very good at auditing itself when it wants to audit itself. It's very good at finding fraud when it wants to turn an eye to the fraud. It's very good at, raising taxes to cover things and blah, blah, blah. The problem is the middle class doesn't have the money anymore. We don't have the money to pay for all the stuff that's out there. So yeah, maybe we could raise, the cap on Social Security FICA taxes and piss off all of the wealthy people and have them move out of the country. Great idea. Maybe we could do that. The point I'm getting at here is that the level of fraud is absolutely insane. And, I don't know if you guys have ever looked up like how much $1 billion actually is or what $1 billion could do for, let's just say, for example, if you took all of the fraud money and you put it towards an orphanage, and you put it towards, basically a scientific group to create future machines that you could store in a house that would be able to take the particles in the air and create food out of it, create water out of it, create electricity out of it, etc. If you were able to do that and solve hunger or solve the problem where orphan children don't have a plan to go someplace, get a job someplace, etc., with their life, if you had the ability to take all this fraud money and put it towards that, you could actually fix in America major, massive problems. But we don't. We don't. And what's blowing my mind is the amount of fraud coming out of, and the two winners. In case you were wondering who were the two winners of the worst fraud of all fraud that's occurred, not just from the Doge era, but before the Doge era, during the OIG era, during all that time, right? The number two, when it comes to Social Security benefits or feeding people or giving people the chance to have a better this or a better that or a better whatever, when it comes to that situation, the number one and the number two, other than like traditional crime, but the Social Security oriented things are Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid and Medicare. The amount of fraud with Medicaid and Medicare is mind-blowing. Yes, retirement benefits had a lot of fraud. No, it wasn't what Trump said about zillions of people over 100 and so many years old. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. What it was that those old people who had fake accounts, and there weren't a ton of them, had earnings that were then put to the IRS under a Social Security number for a person that was no longer alive. So just so you understand, the amount of tax fraud was extremely high. And we don't really want tax fraud at the end of the day, because to be fair, tax fraud means that you guys, social net recipients, retired, disabled, spouses that have had passed, widows, disabled children, SSI recipients, if the taxes don't get paid, if there's more fraud, you guys get screwed. Which is why it's just so weird for me. It doesn't make sense at all for me why the Democratic Party has so much fraud that it's hiding. Sure, there's some political background stuff. Sure, there's some playing the game. When they went after Trump for, 34 felony, whatever it was, all the felony counts that they could potentially invent, make, create, whatever. When they went after him for all of that, we all saw that the level of BS in the criminal law system was quite high during that time period. Quite high. And there's some of that going on right now, just in reverse, right? Now the Democrats are getting it. But I gotta say, the level of stuff that they went after Trump with versus the level of stuff that they're finding that are going on when it comes to real fraud, and I mean like real levels of fraud in the billions of dollars. It's not a good sign. We want to have two competent parties. We want to have competent Democrats and competent Republicans. Both sides have issues with that. But the level of fraud on the D side is just mind-effing blowing. I wish, and I'm gonna pull up the cases and read them to you, because you're gonna get people in the chat in the comments that go, "Oh, it's only because Trump's in." Wait until you read the evidence they have. The evidence is astounding. It makes me sick to think about how available this evidence was. Like how out in the open this shit was to prosecutors. And they just did nothing. Think about the systemic level of turning a blind eye that you would need to get this level of fraud. Some of the companies, when Trump got in, knew that the eyes were going to go ahead and search everything, and they started self-reporting crimes that they committed in the hundreds of millions reaching to billions of dollars levels. It's just, I don't, you know what I mean? It's just mind blowing. Let's talk about what the states have already done specifically in this situation. But, as you know, the states currently are going to argue legally that there's violations under SNAP law, federal privacy laws, that the federal government shouldn't be able to access this list of people, blah, blah, blah. They're going to say that there's security risks, that the recipients are vulnerable because they're poor. They're going to say that there's no special interest. They're going to say that the feds shouldn't have the list because it's arbitrary and capricious. Although you can't argue that. Not after all the things they found, not after the Somali bust. You can't argue that. When the fraud is this rampant, it's like okay, let me give you an example. The level of fraud we are seeing right now is more than most of the levels of fraud that have occurred in this country that were the biggest level of frauds that ever occurred in this country. The Miami fraud, way bigger than that. Way bigger than that. Way bigger than that. Like classic New York Italian mob fraud. This is way bigger than that. You could take the top 10 and combine them, and they would maybe, I don't know, that's a good video. If you add up all the fraud that ever existed in the United States that was able to be adjudicated, judged by a judge, would it even come close to the level of fraud they're discovering right now, meaning the past 10 years worth of fraud that's been committed and they're just figuring it out now? That's a good video topic. Of course, the blue states are screaming bloody murder. They're saying suspected political motivations. This is all related to immigration enforcement ties. How could they? How could they? Oh, the Trump's coming after us because we're, blue states, yada, yada. There's no argument that the blue states can make that there's not really fraud there. There's no argument of that. There's no argument at all of that. We know that there's fraud there. The moment they find any fraud, which is you can't audit 5 million people in California and not find fraud. It's a physical impossibility. It would be a physical impossibility. And remember, finding fraud with food stamps is incredibly easy. Finding people who have a text message on their phone that says, "Hey, I'll sell you my card," or there's some sort of transaction where automatically they got a cash app of $100. It's so easy to audit food stamp recipients. All right, so here's what's basically going on. Arizona already joined the August 2025 lawsuit. Katie Hobbs, she basically, obviously Democrat, issued statements basically saying that this is retaliatory politics. You've got California, Gavin Newsom already joined the lawsuit. He's saying it's morally repugnant. He's allocated $100 million plus from state surplus for potential admin shortfalls. He's basically going to try and just cover food stamps. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it 2 months in a row, though. Let's keep rocking and rolling. Colorado basically joined the lawsuit. Governor Jared Polis, he's taken about $10 million to food banks. December 4th, he's got bridge funding. He's got an angry letter to the USDA. He's demanding data safeguards, all that stuff. You got Connecticut. Governor Ned Lamont announced a $5 million emergency fund for SNAP. Basically, he's co-signed a coalition belief on December 5th, arguing withholding violations court orders against the USDA, saying that they have to continue to pay these amounts, these fees, these things. Delaware joined the lawsuit. Attorney General Kathleen Jennings, December 4th, stated, quote, "Fight in court and with our budget if cuts proceed." So the state will go ahead and fight in court, and they'll try and make things happen with their budget if these cuts proceed. However, they haven't really done much with pulling funding from A to B, so expect Delaware to have a little bit of a tough time actually getting food stamps out. Just expect that. California should be okay, although California has a history, and that's a polite way of putting it, of diverting funds that magically don't get used for the intended purpose of why those funds were there. So just to be clear, California has like the lowest moral high ground. So I guess they would be the lowest moral low ground. So District of Columbia basically allocated $2 million local funds for admin continuity, joined 22 jurisdictions with an AG letter to Congress December 5th. Hawaii, Governor Josh Green issued emergency proclamation. Basically, they're tapping contingency funds around $3 million. They're doing a public rally. They held one on December 5th, decrying privacy risks. Illinois basically got Governor J.B. Pritzker. He said it's the demand for the list of recipients is overbroad and unsupported. On December 30, pledged 15 million state funding bridge. Basically, they're trying to block enforcement of the USDA, or they're trying to stop the USDA from not sending the money that the federal government has. You got Maine, Governor Janet Mills, basically introduced a bill December 4th for permanent state SNAP funding, $4 million reallocation from general fund. So basically, they're trying to go ahead and fund it either way. And just to be clear, like certain states have to get this shit together. Like certain states where it is cold as hail, right? The seventh bottom chilliest ring or whatever you want, or maybe it's the hottest. Just to be clear, certain states don't really have a choice. They have to get these food stamps out because people need the food stamps and the food to be able to survive in this cold environment. Like people that are in warmer environments like Florida or Texas, there's a hope and a prayer, you know what I mean? But the cold environment stuff, if they don't have food, it's even worse. It's even worse. I'm not saying that if you're in Florida and you don't get the money, well, no, technically Florida and Texas are safe. They're done. They already sent over the list. Those people have been audited. You're good. It is what it is. Maryland, Governor Wes Moore announced $10 million emergency allocation on December 3rd. Public statement emphasizing that they want to protect immigrants and basically coordinating with, basically Baltimore for any additionals that they can to get food rolling, things like that. It is weird to me how aggressively the Democratic states are fighting for immigrants, many of which are not here legally, because think about that. They would rather not send, like if you think about just the basics of this, like if you take the A equals B equals C, if you take the very like simple version of this, if you look at this, blue state leadership would rather you potentially not get your food stamp card filled so that they can have their immigrants not be known who are receiving food stamps from the federal government by the working class. They would rather the federal government not know who the fraudsters are, the immigrants who are getting the food stamps illegally are. They would rather that over you, an American, receiving your food stamps on time and consistently paid. Like, just to summarize, like that's what actually is happening here. It's that level of effery. Maryland, Wes Moore, governor, Democrat, obviously announced $10 million emergency allocation December 3rd. Massachusetts, AG Andrea Campbell called request unlawful and dangerous. December 2nd, Governor Maura Healey urged Section 32 fund transfer. In December 4th, letter to USDA. They've got a $10 million contingency that they're basically tapping. They held a rally on October 28th. They're probably going to hold another rally shortly. Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. She is spicy. Not always above reproach, I would say. Basically, quoted, "This is cruelty and not compliance." Although to me, I don't know. Maybe you guys disagree with me. I just feel like the federal government should be able to have access to who's on the food recipient list, seeing how the American people pay the federal government and then the federal government pays for those benefits. I just feel like the connection is really effing simple here. And I understand some of you would say morally the federal government shouldn't know, but I feel like the working class, if the court system says, no, you can't have it, I guarantee you the working class, which is the largest percentage of the voters here, will vote it through. I guarantee you the working class will, I guarantee you the retired will, but pretty much most Americans will vote to force the blue states to show who, ... at the end of the day, will actually have to go ahead and, they'll have to provide this list of who their recipients are. To me, there's no excuse to that. Like, we have to get rid of fraud. Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz, champion. He is in such a shitstorm right now. It is like the level of shitstorm he's in right now is a hurricane with winds that have not yet been measured at the levels that they are there. It's just so bad for him right now. He called it malicious on December 2nd, requested 5 to 10 million legislative emergency aid. December 4th, did a public rally. December 7th, they're going to do another one, which is basically today. Nevada, basically Governor Joe Lombardo, Republican, but state AG is Democrat led, said, basically, he'd like to hand it over to some degree, but the Attorney General Aaron Ford stated December 5th they won't hand over data for deportations. They've got 6 million contingency prepared. New Jersey, 900,000 recipients. Governor Phil Murphy condemned the attack on families. Basically, December 3rd, 8 million from rainy day fund. Attorney General Matthew Plotkin joined December 5 briefing to Supreme Court on injunction. New Mexico joined the lawsuit with Governor Michelle Grisham. Not 7 million bridge funding. December 4th, emphasis on Native American recipients. New York, obviously, I think it's like the second largest of the big blue states when it comes to, I think California is like 5.5 million. New York is 3 million recipients. Kathy Hochul posted on X December. She said, why is Trump hellbent on people going hungry? It's really obvious. It's because Trump expects the homeless and low income to rally the Democrats to do what Trump wants. But Trump does not totally understand how impoverished people work. So again, it's just a miscommunication on rich people versus poor people. That's really all we got here. That's what we got here. Okay. 20 to 30 million and redirected to pantries, EBT ops. Bottom line is New York has the capacity to pay for, the administration of this. They're going with the pantries option, which to me is just effing moronic because you could just put the money on their cards. Anyway, Oregon joined lawsuit. Governor Tina Kotek. They've got 9 million emergency funds. Basically, they're trying to figure out what they're going to be doing with the whole thing. Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, governor, Democrat. Bottom line is this: 15 million state backfill proposed. They're looking at what they're going to do, but they're actually supporting the filing of a declaration. They filed the supporting declaration, and they've got 15 million of that state backfill, and they're negotiating debt agreements, but they were unsuccessful earlier. So Pennsylvania would probably be okay, but they are 1.8 million recipients. So, remember, big state, a lot of processing. Rhode Island, 150,000 recipients. Governor Dan McKee, looks like 3 million contingency funds. Prior judge, John McConnell, which we remember, ordered full benefits in November shutdown, leveraging for new motion. Vermont, they joined the lawsuit. Governor Phil Scott. Basically, they've introduced permanent funding bill. 2 million have already been allocated. Emphasis on rural access. Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin, but basically Democratic AG Jason Mayeres joined suit. 10 million emergency fund announced. December 3rd, mixed response. Washington, million recipients. They've got 12 million from surplus reallocation that they're going to go ahead and probably use. Their Attorney General, Mr. Ferguson, is leading the appeal coordination, filing motions. And then you got Kansas, who's not in the lawsuit. Pretty much everybody else is. Refused data in September, because remember, they originally requested in February. They haven't really been active. Their governor, Laura Kelly, requested reversal, 4 million contingency prepared. They did a public statement about court challenges, yada, yada, although, they need to get involved with that. So the bottom line is this. It's going to be court challenges. I don't know, but I think this is going to go to the Supreme Court because this is just too closely tied to the federal government paying this and having control over these funds. The federal government can't withhold the actual payment of the funds, but the real question is, can they withhold the administration's worth of funds that they pay? State pays 50, they pay 50. Can they withhold that 50%? I don't know. I've been through the law. The legal scholars from your classic, Ivy League schools are saying, no, Trump can't do this, 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 and this. Although they tend to be wrong a lot. I've noticed that the Harvard, the Yales, the Yales are usually pretty good. The Harvards, they're very, very liberal. They don't really give it both sides, especially with the Supreme Court that's not liberal. So, there's certain, UPenn, stuff like that, opinions from attorneys related to that. There's one school that I have zero faith in. I'm not going to say their name, but there's one school when it comes to the legal doctrines that come out of the mouths of those individuals that claim, basically Harvard interest to this one particular institute. But there is one particular school I think is a total shit show with the information they come out with. It's not Dartmouth, it's not Brown, it's not Columbia. I think Princeton's great. I think Yale does a great job. I think Penn's doing a good job, very good job. Harvard, they tend to get it wrong a lot. But again, Harvard tends to be very left-leaning. But I'm not going to say the name. That just is total, in my opinion, shit show when it comes to getting it right with what the Supreme Court is going to do. I'm not going to say the name Cornell at all. But they need to work on what projections they're making for what the district circuit and Supreme Court are likely to come out with, because I have not seen them sink a basket on their legal analysis for quite some time. And I've seen many individuals, who work with the school, who are faculty with the school, whether with directly the programs or not, maybe they may be an adjunct, whatever, but I've seen them come out with a lot of statements. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, that doesn't sound logical to me. But again, to be fair, to Cornell's advantage, the Supreme Court is not always something that people get. A lot of lawyers will project how this will happen. Of course it hasn't. They've already ruled on this. And then the Supreme Court will come out and be like, in maritime law, it was done this way. And while we have not done it this way for the past 400 years, sure as shit right now in this decision, we're going to whip up a nice little maritime rule. And then everybody's just sitting there like, what is going on? This makes no sense. So, all right, now you know what is the major problem with food stamps. You know that this is going to affect a lot of SSI people, a lot of chronically homeless people, a lot of young parents people, a lot of able-bodied workers, etc. I need you to know this, because when the news comes out on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, you're already going to understand what's going on and be able to roll with it. Now, with that said, please remember, Attorney Walter Hnot, the most viewed, subscribed to, clicked on, and chosen online disability attorney. If you need disability representation, give me a call during the 9 to 5. If you want me to go through a tricky situation that you're having, right, and you're already represented, or you're not filing yet, or you already have your benefits, we have a 30-minute and 1-hour mini contract private consultation below. Normally, I go live on Mondays and Thursdays. All last week, I had to do accounting, and I kept falling asleep at night. The thing is this, I am starting to get what's called older. It sucks. I would not recommend it. I do not have a solution for it. But the older I get, the more I love naps, especially those where I fall asleep at the desk and then wake up and realize I'm late for the office in the morning. Just, God, love them. Just love them. I will catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will be live later tonight to make up for not being live as much over the past couple of days. Thank you so much. I will catch you later. Please be nice to each other and have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.